Today we're continuing our discussion of how we know that acetaminophen exposure in susceptible babies and children is causing many, if not most cases, of autism. Today we're talking about studies in laboratory animals that give us three lines of evidence. Line of evidence number 10, 11, and 12. And the important thing about laboratory animal studies is that it tells us so much about whether a drug should even be tried in humans or not. So currently the Food and Drug Administration requires us to test any new drug in laboratory animals, and if it's not safe in those animals, then we never try it in children. So people are wondering, well, how did they get away with this? So this is something acetaminophen was grandfathered in. It's went around the current system, and the lines of evidence I'm going to give you today they're so compelling. They tell you so much about what's going on, and it also tells us that, look, if we use this drug today and we try to test it, it would never make it into a baby or a child. So let's jump into the evidence. So line of evidence number 10. So in my laboratory, just like other laboratories, we give acetaminophen, and then we have control animals that get a carrier solution like saline, just some water with a bit of salt in it, and we compare what happens in those animals. Now, when we did this in my lab using doses of acetaminophen lower than what we give in children, and everything's weight adjusted, but it's actually less than what we give in children, those animals that got acetaminophen, when you compare them to the other animals, they had increased anxiety later in life. Now, that's a pretty big finding. Henry Viberg runs another laboratory, and what he found was he's using laboratory mice. When he gave just 2 doses of acetaminophen, slightly more than we give in babies and children, but it's only 2 doses, he found they permanently lost their ability to learn how to run a maze to find food. I mean, this is what mice do for a living, is they learn how to find food, and they remember where that food is. And his mice that were given acetaminophen couldn't do that anymore. Whereas mice that were not given acetaminophen, they were given the control, those mice could learn how to find food great, just like a normal mice. It only takes a couple of days of training and they're experts, whereas these other mice just never could get it. So that's line of evidence number 10. Line of evidence number 11 comes from Peg McCarthy's lab, the University of Maryland, and it shows that acetaminophen and drugs like acetaminophen that affect certain pathways in the brain have a much more profound impact on males and females. This is important because we know that autism affects males much more than females. So that's line of evidence number 11. And then finally, there's a third line of evidence from laboratory animals, line of evidence number 12, which tells us that even in adult laboratory animals, acetaminophen kills cortical neurons. Now, cortical neurons are a part of the brain that's very important in autism. So those are all 3 of the lines of evidence. And again, we should have done these studies, and people can't even believe, you mean nobody did these studies before this drug got used in children? No, they did not. We're just now doing them. And what we're finding is that under current rules and regulations from the Food and Drug Administration, this drug could never be used in children. It couldn't even be tested as an experimental drug.